Let me just kind of briefly tell you why we need to learn about commission sharing agreement. There are different forms that are used when it comes to working with another agent. Lisa Chen is online as well. Okay. All right, Lisa. And who else we got? No one. Okay, that's it. The reason why we need to learn about commission sharing agreement is that oftentimes we work with another agent either within our company or outside of our company. It's not good if you do things verbally. If you do things verbally, you lack the protection. People remember things differently, and with the passage of time, sometimes people forgot. Even I myself, I forget. That's why I really prefer that we have commission sharing agreement in writing, so there's no argument. When you sign a commission sharing agreement, not only must you agree on how to split the commission, you must also agree on the job description. On your commission sharing agreement, you're supposed to state in there what each person is responsible for. Because if one person performs no responsibilities, in that case, you should not be using the commission sharing agreement. There is a different form that you use. If one person is strictly just going to be a referral, we use the referral agreement. You do not use the commission sharing agreement. It happens a lot. Say, for example, you got one person in SoCal working with another person in NorthCal on a property in NorthCal. Chances are the person in NorthCal is going to be doing quite a bit of legwork for that listing versus the one that is in SoCal. The one that is in SoCal may decide just to be a referral, but the problem with being a referral is on the MLS, you get no credit as a referral. Whereas if you're a co-listing agent, you get that as a credit. Now, that credit is actually very important. When you get that credit, you can claim you sold the property. Whereas if you don't get credit, when the deal closes escrow, it doesn't show up on the MLS that you are co-listing agent. So some agent may need to negotiate with another agent and say, well, even though I do nothing, I want to be reflected as a co-listing agent, but that's all negotiable, right? Now, perhaps you might talk to the other agent that's going to be doing most of the work, that agent is going to do open houses, is going to do Zipforms, right? Is going to do all of the work. And you, on the other hand, in SoCal, is doing nothing. If you plan on that and still want to get credit, you can still negotiate with the agent up north and say, I don't want to do anything. However, I want to be reflected as a co-listing agent on the MLS because I want to get a credit. Frankly, if I'm the agent working in NorthCal, I want to get a bigger cut, right? I want to get a bigger split since I'm the one doing all the work, right? Maybe you get 75% of that split, and of your 75%, the company will take whatever company dollar the company is going to take, okay? Whatever your split is with the company, it will take a split, the company dollar, from that 75% that you receive, okay? And then the other agent that is in SoCal that is receiving 25%, for example, and from that 25%, that agent in SoCal is going to have to pay that agent's company dollar, okay, to Centermac. This is how it works. But on your commission sharing agreement, you do not need to mention, don't make it complicated. You do not need to do any math on that commission sharing agreement insofar as payment of company dollar. Payment of company dollar is determined by your ICA with Centermac. When you sign the ICA, okay, that determines how much you have to pay company dollar from your earnings. In this case, you do not earn 100%. So the company will take its company dollar from your 75%. So basically, whatever your split is, you still have to take into account the company dollar. All right? Okay? Let's say, for example, you're on an 80-20 split with Centermac. Okay? And let's say of that 75%, you wind up with, let's say, $5,000, correct? If $5,000 equals 75% of the total commission that Centermac gets from this transaction, from that $5,000, you still have to pay your company dollar, correct? $1,000. As all of you know, next year, we're going to have a new compensation system, which I will announce December 15, okay? We're still working on finalizing, fine-tuning, trying to give you guys the best terms that we can get, try to be as competitive, as inclusive as possible, taking into account all of the good things that other companies are offering. Of course, every company is different. You know, some company will have certain things, other company will not have those things. Because you know why? They offer different services to their agents, that's why. Some company will have no services. In exchange, they get a smaller amount from you, okay? Now, we're not such company, okay? Keep in mind. But some company will take a lot of stuff from you, okay? They have franchise fees. I don't know how many fees they got, okay? And then on top of the franchise fees, you still have that company dollar that you have to pay, okay? Now, we don't have franchise fees. All I'm saying is that when you decide which one is the best, you have to take everything into account, okay? We try to be very competitive, all right? Now, this commission sharing agreement, the one that you're going to be preparing, if you're working with another agent within Centermac Realty, you don't even have to mention company dollar in that commission sharing agreement. That should not even be mentioned at all, okay? I know a couple of agents, they were never taught how to use the commission sharing agreement. They try to do all this complicated math inside the commission sharing agreement. It's very confusing. Plus, sometimes, you know, there are agents that got better terms than newer agents, for example, and then you just kind of compare yours with hers, and then you start comparing. We don't want agents comparing their compensation because different agents sometimes could end up with different packages just because of their ability. I mean, company actually will offer better terms to you if you are a great performer. Why should not this great performer be given better terms? They should be given better terms because they bring more value to the company. So no point comparing your package to another agent's package. We do not want to mention it in the commission sharing agreement. In the commission sharing agreement, you're just going to mention how you're going to split the total commission with the other agent as between you and that other person, and no need to mention about what company is going to get, okay? And that's what we're going to learn today. Now, I mentioned that sometimes you may be working with another agent from another company. If you work with another agent from another company, and it's not uncommon, and for example, you know, somebody wants to, somebody has a very good friend who has a property from out of the area. Out of the area means Centermac does not have local agent in that area, for example. In that case, you get this opportunity. You don't have to give it up. Just because you are far from that location doesn't mean you cannot make money. You can make money. All you need to do is just to work with the local agent. If you work with a local agent from another company, you need to sign a commission sharing agreement with that agent, okay? And this special form actually allows that. Now, on the other hand, sometimes you don't care so much about being on the record as a co-listing agent. All you care about is your referral fee agreement. If that's the case, there's another simpler form that you can use. It's called the referral fee agreement. That one is a one-page agreement. It's so much easier to use, okay? You will see that agreement later on. But we're going to start with the complicated one first. Try to stay quiet, okay? Mute yourself if you have not done that. Okay, we got Aaron on the invitation list. Thank you, Aaron. A couple of people who's using their cell phone, and with the cell phone, usually I can't tell who's online. So you just have to send me a chat to let me know that you are also in participation. And I got Lily. She probably left, okay? And I may have a couple of other people who join us late. So let's go ahead and open up that Zipforms I was talking about. And I want to talk about this form because more and more agents are using this form, and we need to know exactly how to use this form. Okay. First of all, I'm still using the old platform. Some of you are using the new platform. Now, whether you're using the new platform or old platform, the forms are the same. It's just the platform is different. Okay. So I'm just going to bring out that form. Okay. Starting next year, I'm going to start the new platform. But right now, we're ending the year with the old platform. Okay. Let's see who's making all of this noise. Who's that? Probably the new people. They don't know how to mute themselves. Okay. If you're new, learn how to mute yourself so we can have quietness. Okay, Lily, you should know better. Okay. All right. Okay, now let's go to that form. Okay. You are signing like you normally do. All right. So those of you that have Zipform account, you know what I'm talking about. Okay. Those of you that are still new, that have not used Zipform before, today's class is not the class where I teach you. Okay. Today's class, we're just going to go over the very form that we're interested in. Okay. If you don't know the full name of the form, just type in the keyword. It will show up. This is commission agreement. Okay. Agent commission sharing agreement. This is the form I want to teach today. Okay. So when you look for forms, right, just type in some keywords. Sometimes you'll be able to find the form. Okay. Because it's hard to remember the names of every single form that you use. Now, this is the form. It says between associate licensees. It is not limited to associate licensee from the same company, but you can use it for working with another agent from a different company. There's nothing wrong with you working with another agent from another company. It could happen from time to time. Okay? Now, say, for example, here we got who's working with who. And let's say we got Judy, okay? And she's in Sacramento, right? So we'll fill in Judy's license number here. I'll leave it blank since I don't remember her license number. And then she's going to be working with Nicole Wang, right? Okay. And who's another Centermac agent. Nicole is out of SoCal, and Judy is in Sacramento. And the two of them are working on the listing in Elk Grove, for example, right? So we know the property is going to be in the city of Elk Grove. Now, when you do an agent commission sharing agreement, it could be per transaction sharing agreement, or it could be a long-term working relationship, okay? If you want to work with another agent on a long-term basis, you can always sign an agreement like that. Whether you work with an agent on a short-term basis or long-term basis, there's one important thing that you want to keep in mind, which is you want protection from this agent that is working with you stealing your lead or getting your lead away from you. If you decide you need that, there's a provision in there to protect you. If you have a lead, and this lead is important to you, you want to protect yourself because you don't know how the other agent is going to behave. And this agent start working with this lead, especially when you are in SoCal. And it's your friend in SoCal who has that property in Elk Grove. You consider this friend an important connection. And you don't want, say, for example, Judy to use this lead and work with her on other transactions that you are not aware of. You can set that restriction in your commission sharing agreement to protect yourself. That's another reason I'm asking you guys to sign the commission sharing agreement. We know what happened. We had a situation, I'm sure some of you read my post online already, between Kathleen and Mina. All right? We didn't have a commission sharing agreement between the two of them. That's a big mistake. Because what happened is, after Mina left the company, she continued to be in contact with this lead that Kathleen got. It took Kathleen a long time, a big effort, spending money and time to secure this lead. Unfortunately for Kathleen, she's in North Cal, and her lead wants to buy in SoCal. So she contacted me and said, Kenny, who do you know in our company that can help me show this property in Irvine? Of course, at that time, it was Mina. Okay, so I called up Mina. I said, Mina, Kathleen has a buyer that I would like to see properties in Irvine. Are you willing to work with her? But if you're working with her, you're splitting commission with her 50-50. And Mina say, okay, great, I'm willing to do it. That's why I let Mina have the lead. Okay. The mistake I made was I did not make them sign the commission sharing agreement. In the end, you know how Kathleen found out that Mina continued to work with this buyer, eventually closed escrow? Was that Mina posted a post on WeChat. She took a picture with the buyer after close of escrow and used it to promote herself. Okay? She had the buyer and the seller, and she took a picture with them and wrote some nice things about what efforts she put in to close the deal. Okay? It's great marketing material for her. But at our expense, remember, this lead is considered to be company lead because it came from another agent within the company. So it is company lead. Now, when you get a company lead like that, there are some provisions in your ICA with Centermac that may restrict you from doing business with company lead after you left Centermac. Okay? So the more I want to protect it, and I kind of regretted I didn't have them sign something like that. Because maybe Kathleen needed some protection. Maybe Kathleen said, well, this is my client. You have to think long term. When you get a lead we give a lead to another agent to work with this lead, you have to think long term. Because if you close escrow with this buyer, what if this buyer have referrals, right? Of course, that's a disadvantage you have when you have to work with the buyer who's buying in another location, right? So you want to kind of set some rules in here, okay? If you want to work with that person, you decide because you bring the lead. You want to know, you want the other agent to agree on how she can make use of this lead, okay? So if I'm Kathleen, there's one place where I can set those restrictions, all right? You see it later on. Okay, now let's go down the list. Commencement date, okay, how about we say today's date is the commencement date. So it commences on October 30, 2017. It will have an expiration date or it doesn't have an expiration date you decide if you want a fixed term or you don't want to have a fixed term, but either side may terminate this agreement by giving a 30-day notice. Kind of like a month-to-month tenancy, where it's month-to-month, right? So you give a 30-day notice. Or you can decide, all right, let's fix term. You can have, let's say, I think in that example that I gave you, do I want this relationship to last more than 6 months? I think if a buyer is going to that location to buy, maybe 6 months is enough. So I set myself a fixed term of 6 months. Okay, I'll say 6 months from commencement. I put down 6 months. So after 6 months, the agreement is terminated. All right. So the North Cal agent at that point can decide what she wants to do. She can continue to work with the SoCal agent by signing either another commission sharing agreement or by signing addendum, changing the fixed term from 6 months to a longer term before it expires. Totally up to the parties to decide. Or you may decide, you know what, if I don't feel comfortable at the given point, then I want to give 30-day notice to the SoCal agent and say termination notice. Maybe I'll just say a 30 days notice. Okay, it's totally up to you how you want to do it. Okay, now if you don't select the fixed term, then it becomes this termination notice term. Okay, and then or you can say completion of a transaction. All right. Now, but that's totally up to you. You have 3 options. You can do fixed term, you can do 30-day notice, or you can do completion of a transaction. Say, for example, longer term relationship, maybe termination notice is better. Shorter term relationship, maybe fixed term or completion of a transaction is better. Okay, so that's how I would decide if I want a fixed term termination notice or completion of a transaction. It kind of depends on whether it's a short-term working relationship or a long-term working relationship. Now, if it is a long-term working relationship, then I highly recommend you use the termination notice. So much easier. Right? Then either side can terminate by giving the other side a 30 days notice. Okay? Who's making all of this noise? Not Lisa. Lisa is good with keeping the noise down. Okay. All right. If you're using your iPhone, try to not make it. All right, good. Everybody's quiet now. Okay. Perfect. Let's continue. So next thing is the scope of agreement and cover transaction. So when you sign a commission sharing agreement, you have to decide what is the scope of agreement. Is it a per transaction, which means that after the escrow closes, this working relationship is terminated? Or is some other, sometimes the scope of agreement could be based on responsibilities, or it could be based on a specific property. Say, for example, you're going on vacation, right? I know Zheng Yi worked with Leo. At that time, you guys did not sign a commission sharing agreement. You should have done one. From now onwards, I want everybody to sign commission sharing agreement, okay? All right? Fortunately, nothing bad happened, but you should have done one. Okay. Now, because Zheng Yi travels, so sometimes, he needs to have an agent to help him with his buyer, right? Now, certainly he can set certain rules about what Leo can do with his buyer because that is his lead, right? You can do it in the commission sharing agreement, okay? But if you never had one, then everything is fair game because once he knows this person, you don't have any restriction in here, then it's fair game, all right? Just know that you can actually set restriction here. Now, Now it says here scope of agreement cover transaction. A says all activity. B says limited activity. So you get a choice. All activity means all activity. It means this agreement shall apply to all transactions entered into during its term for which either AL is entitled to compensation, except, so you can set exceptions here, okay? For example, there are two agents that have a long-term working relationship. They decide to sign a commission sharing agreement. Once you sign that, and if it's a long-term relationship, I only need to see it once, unless you guys change the agreement again. Then I know every time when I cut a check, commission check, I know exactly how much to cut for you guys, because you do have that commission sharing agreement, right? It's easy. There's some, so far, I don't believe I have any agents that work with another agent long-term here yet, but I know eventually I will, okay? Now, this particular agent that is working with another agent can make it all activity, which means that this is very long-term. But even with that, it can carve out some exceptions, such as AL's own property. Now, who's AL? You can look at AL means what? It means both of them. AL means associate licensee, okay? That's what AL means. So you got AL1 and AL2. So in this case, both AL can agree on exceptions. If either AL wants to cover exception involving their own property, they can do that. Because if it's their own property, maybe they don't want to work with this agent on a 50-50 basis. Possibly, right? They want everything all to themselves, so they can cover up that exception. Or family members of either AL. Yeah, if it's family members of either AL, they don't want the other AL to share in the commission. That's fine too, but that's totally up to them. Or any specific persons or entities. You know, if you work with another agent on a long-term basis, quite likely you are going to be sharing your connections if you work with another agent. Now, if there are certain connections that you don't want this agent that you're working with to ever work with this connection, you can put in the guy's name here or the entity's name here, so you know it's very clear that these persons are excluded from the commission sharing agreement. So you can exclude relatives, you can exclude your own property, or you can exclude specific person or entity, even if it says all activity, okay? All right, now limited activity, it says this agreement only applies to the following. You can actually limit it. You don't want to have all activity, you want to limit it, that's fine. It says transactions in the community city of. So this one you can limit it by city, okay? So quite likely if you work with another agent on a long-term basis, you will not be using B, limited activity. More likely you will be using all activity. But if you do it on a transaction by transaction basis, then most likely it's the limited activity, right? Okay, so you can check this one involving certain community or city, or you can limit it to just one single property if you want, okay? Either by city or by property. Or you can even limit it to a specific person or entity, okay? But that's totally up to you, however you want to negotiate it. Okay. Now, you can even limit it by the geographical or farm area, such as a certain zip code. Okay. If your farm is in a certain zip code, you can limit it by zip code if you want to. Okay. Now, for example, you know, my farm is Sunnyvale. I got 94087. I tell all those agents that did door knocking for me that if I ever get a listing from a property owner that is in the route in which they did the door knocking, they get to co-list with me. When they co-list with me, I want to sign this commission sharing agreement with them. You know, now I will sign an agreement. You know how I want to split my commission with them. Remember, I'm also an agent, so I could be working with them as an individual. Okay, not exactly as a broker, but as an individual. But that's totally up to me. Okay. All right, but that's within a certain farm area. So I just give you an example. My farm is the Sunnyvale area. Okay, 94087. Okay. Or you can have other limited activity. All right. Well, that's totally. Next, for example, you know, let's say for example you got a NorCal agent that is working with a SoCal agent. Maybe the NorCal agent just want the SoCal agent to do showing and nothing more. If that's the case, other is what you want to check, and you will say showing, right? You will say showing of properties in Irvine only. That means that you are working with this agent in SoCal, and the agent that works in SoCal is only responsible for doing the showing. And after the showing, the agent in NorCal is doing all the paperwork, is doing all the client contact, okay? You can do it that way. Totally up to you. All right. Number 3, pre-existing client relationships. You know, sometimes you may have situation where you already have pre-existing relationship with these clients, and you want to be known on the commission sharing agreement. So you will attach something like Exhibit 1. Let's say, for example, you came from another company, and you came to Centermac, and you want to work with another Centermac agent on a long-term basis, and these customers all came from your prior relationship, and you do not want this Centermac agent that you work with to have any benefit from any of these pre-existing client relationships. Rather, you want to, both of you, to benefit from client relationships that you develop together. You can do that too. And attach the Exhibit 1 that has your client's information. Well, some people might say, well, why should I let this person know my client's names? Shouldn't I keep it confidential? Well, the problem is, it's a sword that cuts both ways. If you say, I don't tell him, well, if you don't tell him, and then later on somehow they met at Starbucks and became friends, and then later on found out, oh, you her customer? And then this person is going to say, well, I'm working with her right now, and I want to benefit from this new friend that I just made at Starbucks, right? And then this other agent who had this this client in her pre-existing list, and it wasn't disclosed here, so now she cannot cry and say, well, you know what, it's my client, you can't touch that person. And then this agent here says, well, I met her at Starbucks. Why can't I keep my relationship with her because I met her at Starbucks? I didn't know she was your client before. You should have told me that. So that's why I said it's a sword that cuts both ways. I think if it were me, if I want to have a long-term working relationship with another agent, I'm sure that other agent have her own contact list. Why don't you just, put in the agreement, these are my contacts and these are your contacts. You know, if I ever get any contacts, any business from these contacts, this commission sharing agreement does not apply to those contacts. All right? You got to make it clear here. Okay? All right. So it's got AL1 and AL2. So AL1 and AL2 can each check this box. Okay? Or AL1 and AL2 might have, might not care about this, but that's totally up to them. I'm just making suggestion to you because I don't want any arguments between my agents and waste a lot of time trying to mediate their dispute. Okay? It's not worth my time. So that's why I want, if you want to work with an agent, make sure you have the writing clear. Okay? Make sure you don't argue with each other. All right, I'm going to uncheck this for now. Or if you don't check this, then A1 and A2 agree that this lease if any, represent the complete identification. Oh, actually, I think if you leave A and B blank, then C will not apply because it talks about these lists. So C would only apply if you either check A or B, okay? Represent the complete identification of any clients brought into this commission sharing agreement for all purposes of this agreement. You know, if you are an agent, once in a while you have clients that are going to buy properties outside of your area and you want to work with another Centermac agent. I do encourage agents to work with each other. That way we keep all of the business and revenue in-house. We don't have to split our revenue with another agent from outside, okay? Plus, this agent that you're working with, they know all the protocols within the company, so it's a lot easier. If you go outside, I mean, they are not familiar with our protocol, and they might not be following the rules that we follow, so it's better to work with the agents in-house, okay? All right, so number 3 will not apply unless you check either A or B, okay? And 3 is talking about pre-existing relationship. Now we're talking about compensation, right? Gross compensation earned under a covered transaction by either AL shall be split between AL1 and AL2 as follows, and then paid by broker subject to each AL split with broker. You already have this language in here, so you do not have to get into the minor detail about how much Centermac gets and how much each agent gets after they pay the company dollar. You do not have to get into that because the ICA takes care of that, okay? A talks about pre-existing clients, okay? Now, A would only apply if you have previously checked number 3. If you skip number 3 altogether, then A would not apply. Now, assuming that you have checked number 3, okay, then 4A might apply. So you got pre-existing clients and you got shared clients. So maybe, you know, you and another agent are good friends. You wouldn't mind sharing your pre-existing clients, right? And then you decide that if your partner wants to work with your pre-existing client, your partner should still get something. How much your partner gets is totally up to you, the way you guys negotiate it. Now, you may say that, well, I don't know this partner very well. I don't want him to get anything if it's my pre-existing client, okay? It says for all covered transactions with pre-existing clients, 50% of the compensation to AL1 and 50% of the compensation to AL2, or you can either say, all right, you know what, we're going to be buddies, we're going to be working on a long-term basis, you know what, 不要斤斤计较, okay? Don't penny and dime with your partner. If you don't want to penny and dime with your partner, then it's 50-50, even for shared, even for pre-existing clients, okay? But if you want to penny and dime, then it says the AL who identified the pre-existing client pursuant to paragraph 3 shall be paid whatever percentage of the compensation and percentage of the compensation to the other AL. So you can say if it's AL1's pre-existing client, you can make it 100% AL1, right? And 0% AL2, but that's totally up to you, which means that if it's your pre-existing client, your partner doesn't get anything if you ever have transaction with your pre-existing client, okay? Or you can say, well, since my pre-existing client, but you're my partner, I can say 80% for me and 20% for you, right? But that's totally up to you guys to negotiate. Just make sure you put everything in writing so you don't run into that problem. But if you are both new agents, you probably don't have a lot of pre-existing clients, and it is very short encounter like the one we just described in Irvine, you can skip pre-existing client altogether. because you don't have to worry about it, right? But if you consider this client that your SoCal partner or this agent that you're working with is going to be working with your pre-existing client, you can put this client on the pre-existing list and let this person that's showing properties in Irvine know that this is my pre-existing client. So you give that list. But if your list only has one name, then this agent that works in Irvine only consider this person a pre-existing client of yours. So let's say, for example, you forgot to mention to the person in Irvine, oh, by the way, her sister is also my pre-existing client. And then the agent in Irvine showed property, and then they bought property in Irvine. The brother bought it, and then the brother told the agent in Irvine about the sister, and then the agent in NorCal forgot about listing the sister's name on that list. Then it's not the problem of the agent in Irvine to get business from the sister. Okay, so just bear in mind. Okay, so if you want to protect yourself, you should decide. You should let this agent know. Oh, by the way, his sister is also my client, or something like that. But you need to have that list there. Okay, now this is pre-existing clients. Shared clients is usually for longer term. For the one that we just described in Irvine, you probably don't have shared client because it's one transaction only. So there's no shared client, so to speak. If anything, the client is pre-existing client of the NorCal agent. Okay? All right. And of course, you can have other specific compensation. You just need to attach the addendum. If you want to make it very complicated, okay, I don't encourage you to make it complicated. Keep it simple, all right? But if you have to, you can select C, okay? Now, broker instructions, this is a standard language. It says both AL and A2 hereby instruct broker to pay them according to this agreement. Now, remember, this form can be used on AL2 from a different brokerage, okay? Both the AL and A2 acknowledge that brokers shall have the right, but not the obligation, to withhold total compensation if there is a dispute. Now, certainly, if I'm a broker, right, despite the fact that you have a written commission sharing agreement and you still have a dispute, what am I supposed to do? I think the logical thing for me to do is to ask you guys to go to mediation, or I can try to mediate the dispute, but I'll hold on to the money until you resolve the dispute. Alternatively, I can still at least write you guys checks for the portions that are not in dispute. And then the portion that is in dispute, I'll hold on to it until you guys have resolved your dispute, okay? That's a decision I could make according to this paragraph. I don't have the obligation, but I have the right to withhold. Okay, number 5, shared expenses. Now, why is shared expenses important? Because if you're going to be working with another agent, whether it's Centermac agent or outside agent, you kind of need to know how you're going to share your expenses. If you're going to be co-listing, I know the two of you never talked about sharing expenses, right? Yeah, never. He's paying all the gas money, taking clients around, right? You could have talked about that, though, because you could have said, all right, you know what? We're going 50-50, but, I do not contribute any expenses. But that's up to you to negotiate, okay? But that is something that should have been mentioned in your relationship, in your working relationship, and it can be addressed here in this paragraph. It says ALs agree that except as otherwise specified, all expenses incurred by either AL in connection with activity intending result in a covered transaction shall be split using the same ratio that's specified for compensation in paragraph 4. Now, this is a simple way to resolve expenses, because you know why? If one person is, let's say, earning 80%, the other person is only earning 20%, you could agree that the person is earning 80% is going to contribute 80% of the expenses. The person that's getting only 20% is going to contribute only 20% of the expenses. That will be the logical way to share your expenses. By default, this is how it is shared. Okay. Now, if you want it any other way, paragraph A will not apply, because paragraph A indicates by default. Okay. It will be proportional to how you split your commission. Okay. And then this one talks about the timing of it now. Now, maybe, when you take buyers to see houses, your main expenses is mainly just your gas money and wear and tear on your car. Also, meals. Meals is another possibility, because you probably take clients to lunch or whatever, right? And you didn't talk about these things. And then suddenly, when escrow closes, you talk to the other person, hey, you know what? How about contributing half of the money that I spent on this buyer? I mean, if you work with a person you're not familiar with, that could happen, because at that moment, you got to look at each other. I thought you're going to pay for all of that. It's my lead. You're supposed to pay for all of it, right? You never talked about that, right? You could have had an argument over that, okay? But you didn't, fortunately. But certainly, this can be addressed in your commission sharing agreement, right? I think it's more important in listing situation, because when you list, the expenses are higher. When you list, you have to order post, you have to print flyers, you have to spend other form of money to promote the property, right? You have to have food at the open houses. You got to spend money. You're going to have to spend money. So when you have a co-listing situation, one person is in SoCal, the other person is NorCal. That person is in SoCal may not be willing to travel to NorCal to do the open houses, and then the person that is NorCal is going to be doing the open houses, right? And that person in NorCal is going to say, well, I've already contributing more time and everything, right? I don't want to pay for everything. How about you in SoCal pay for all the expenses? I just contribute my time. I like to keep things simple. I think if you're in SoCal and the listing is in NorthCal, I think the person who's spending more time on it is going to be spending more time, and she should be getting more in terms of compensation. And because he's getting more in terms of compensation, by default, he's contributing proportionally the amount of expenses. Okay? So if it's 80-20 split, expenses-wise, it's also 80-20 split. It's a lot simpler than a different formula. Okay? I like to keep things simple. It's a lot easier for me. Okay? Unless you have a good reason to make it complicated, don't make it complicated. Okay? All right, and then this one talks about, well, when you're going to decide how much each person is required to pay, there's a statement due, right? After the closing of each transaction. Now, this one is talking about closing of each transaction. This is talking about long-term relationship. The same provision will apply to short-term relationship. If you work with somebody on a short-term situation, certainly this would apply as well. Okay? And then each AL shall be solely responsible for the cost of obtaining, maintaining, and keeping current that AL's real estate license. Of course, this is all individual expense. MLS fees, AOR fees, agent charges from broker, Yeah, this one, between you and your broker, each agent is responsible for their own expenses. Okay? Transaction coordinator, if you ever use one, this one talks about it. I won't get into it until when we start having transaction coordinator. Right now, you guys are your own transaction coordinator. In the future, we will have as we grow bigger. Okay. Business identity. Salesperson own fictitious business name. Now, this one talks about fictitious name, though. AL and A2 agree that they each may or will conduct any and license activity under the name. This is fictitious name. Which applicable is the fictitious business name already used and owned by either AL or AL1 or AL2 or both, or which will be owned by both. You can decide. You know, if you're going to be doing business with your partner, you can both form a fictitious name, but that's totally up to you. Okay? But be careful how you form fictitious name. There are certain rules and regulations. All right? Okay? If you want to form fictitious business name, you check with me, but we're not going to talk about that today. And then, of course, you will have team names, right? If you ever have team, and you're sharing commission with your team lead, between the team member and the team lead, this may be a box that needs to be checked. So we're not going to talk about that today. Next time we will. Okay? Compensation and other rights and obligation upon termination. Now, this one talks about pending transactions or business. For covered transactions resulting from then existing open escrow or referral fee agreement or contract under which escrow has not yet opened, listing or buyer representation agreement shall be paid as if the agreement had not been terminated, or as follows. Now, this is talking about when you have pending transactions or business. Okay? Let's say, for example, you have pending transaction, and you want to work with someone as a long-term partner. You have to address the pending transaction, though. You know, you want this person to get anything from pending transaction or not. Okay, it should be addressed here in paragraph 7A. Future transactions with pre-existing clients. I think we might have talked about that. If after termination of this agreement, the client chooses to work with the AL who identified the pre-existing client pursuant to paragraph 3, the other AL shall not be entitled to any compensation from the future transaction. So let's say, for example, I'm the one that brings in the lead, and then later on the two of us begin to serve the same client, and later on we decided to depart from each other. Well, this one says from that point onwards, the pre-existing client of the AL that bring in the pre-existing the lead will keep this client. The departing AL that did not bring in the lead originally will not be able to work with this client anymore. Okay? So it is like that unless you change it. If after termination of this agreement, the client chooses to work with the AL who did not identify the pre-existing client pursuant to paragraph 3, then for any future transaction entered into by the pre-existing client with the other AL, within 12 or other months from the date of this agreement, the AL who identified the pre-existing client shall or shall not entitled to referral fee. Now, this is talking about the opposite. Now, you got two agents working with each other. One brought in this client, the other one did not. However, after a while, that client decided that that client liked the other agent who did not bring in this client better. So if I'm the client that brings in the lead, am I going to say, all right, you know what, forget it. Even though I brought in this lead, but he doesn't like me anymore, he wants to work with the other agent. That's fine. If that's the case, just my luck. You can say that. Or you can say, no way, I brought in the lead, okay? So even if this client insists he's going to work with my partner or my former partner, I want referral fee. You can do that, okay? Maybe you work very hard to get this lead to begin with. And then somehow or other, the two of them develop such a great relationship that the client no longer wants to work with you, but wants to work with this other agent who didn't bring in the lead. That's why in the example that I told you in Irvine, if I were the no-cal agent, I want to definitely pay attention to this paragraph. Let's say, for example, the agent in SoCal decided to leave Centermac. Then I don't want this agent to ever work with this customer. Now, if for whatever reason this customer still wants to work with the agent in SoCal, I want a referral fee. That way I did not lose everything. So this is the provision that protects you. All right? I certainly will want to use that. If I'm from NoCal, I send a client over to SoCal, right? Okay. Here is what you decide, whether it's 12 months. Hey, you can put 60 months. For the next 60 months, I get referral fee. If you put 60 months, chances are, this agent may still work with this customer, but this agent knows if he ever makes commission, he has to pay you commission, right? On the referral fee though, right? But that's totally up to you, okay? That's between you and your partner, okay? The one that you're working with, all right? Okay. Okay, future transactions with the shared client. Regardless of which AL the shared client chooses to work with, the other AL shall be entitled to a referral fee. Now, you can work out a system with your partner. Let's say, for example, one day you terminated your commission sharing agreement. Because you yourself also spend a lot of time with the same client, you might reach an agreement with your partner and say, all right, should we depart and this client goes with you? I want referral fee, and my percentage is 20%, for example, right? So whatever transaction you make with this client, I always get 20% referral fee, correct? But here says 3 months. Maybe you can make it longer, right? You can make it, let's say, 24 months, right? For the next 24 months, if you ever do a transaction with this customer who is our shared client, I get a 20% on referral fee. But you negotiate however you want to negotiate, okay? See, Cheng-Yi, you didn't have an agreement with him now. Aren't you afraid now? He's going to steal your customer away? Yeah. Okay. All right. But anyways, the rest is all, like the standard provision, so I don't really go into it. This one talks about the independent contractor agreement. I highlighted the most important thing for you, so next time when you do your commission sharing agreement, you kind of pay attention to this stuff, okay? Really, frankly, I wish that in that case that I'm talking about, we had signed something like that. Then, maybe the person who left the company might think twice about working with this customer, okay? It gives me a little bit of protection, but at least worst case, I still get my referral fee though, right? Because Kathleen is going to get her referral fee, and from there, I still get my company dollar, right? Okay. All right. So the rest is all standard. So, and 15A talk about responsible broker. Now, when you have same broker, then you skip A completely. Same company, but you have different company. You got to fill out 15A though. Okay. So that's where you fill out 15A. Okay. And since these two agents are same company, so I will be signing this. So remember, your commission agreement, sharing agreement, must be reviewed and approved by me, okay? So after you sign, forward a copy to me because I need to save a copy for payroll, because when I write commission check, I need to know how big the check I should write and how much to pay each person, okay? So today we're going to cover this. Next time when we have time, we'll cover referral fee agreement. But referral fee agreement is actually a lot simpler than this. It's like a one-page agreement. So even if I don't cover it, but at least you know it's available. Okay? Okay, that's it today. I'll talk to you guys next time.